the Lord began showing me these kinds of things, that this is the reason for anti-Semitism. That the devil isn't interested in the Jews because they're Jews. He's interested in them because of the covenant promises that God has made to them. And when he said to them, and he repeated it over and over throughout the words of the prophets, where he said, in the acharit, in the end of the age, I will have compassion on you, and I will gather you back to the land. And we're watching that gathering, and this is why when Israel was made a nation, and I know there's all kinds of controversy as to whether the establishment of the secular state of Israel in 1948 was a move of God. Well, I'll tell you what, there's no way, as I look at the flow of history, that there could be anything other than a miracle. When you have people like Joseph Stalin voting for the statehood of Israel, because he thought that he knew they were socialists, he thought he'd have an ally in the Middle East. And then he was like, well, he shortly was disabused of that delusion shortly after that. But the point was that out of the ashes of the Holocaust, when the enemy really tried to destroy every single man, woman, and child of Jewish heritage in all of Europe, and then he would have done it throughout the world. You understand that. And we need to be students of history. We need to be students of Jewish history, secular history, and Christian history. And as I've studied some of the occultic roots of Nazism and Hitler's military blunders during the war, if he had listened to his generals, there'd be no England. And if you were a blonde British woman, you would have been a baby factory, and all of you men, you would have been slaves. Because he had a plan to invade England, but instead he suffered a delusion, and there was a Brit praying that Hitler would suffer the delusion. You know who I'm talking about. His name is slipping my mind. Rees Howells in his book, The Intercessor. And he paid a personal great price in his health for that kind of intercession. But he prayed that Hitler would suffer a delusion because that's what God put in his spirit to pray. And Hitler, contrary to what his generals told him, invaded Russia when he had a peace treaty with them. And all of the generals saying, you can't invade Russia and win. Look at what Napoleon tried to do. You just can't do it. And that great winter came, 1 million German soldiers died, the tanks froze, the resistance of the Russian people and soldiers was so intense that, the war began to end, because while he was being defeated in the East, he was not listening to his submarine commander who said, give me 50 submarines, I'll win the war for you. I'll surround Britain, we'll cut them off. But he didn't do it. So the Americans were able to come up with a technology for depth charges. They cleared the sea lanes, and then the invasion could take place, which happened in Normandy. You know the story. But there were many such stories during the war, because God was saying, listen to this is very important. God was saying, as he said through Job, this far and no further. This far and no further. And I tell you, the same God of Israel is looking at what's happening now, and there's a marker that he has in his sand, if you will, that says this far and no further. Because this is all about preparing the way for the return of the Lord. This is God doing work in the hearts of the Jewish people, because they're crying to God, why do they hate us? Why do they hate us? What is going on here? And God is stirring the hearts of rabbis and professors and scholars. And the issue of the Jewishness of Jesus, which was forbidden for centuries, is now on the table on Jewish scholars. And you're reading books coming out about the reclamation and the Jewishness of Jesus. Rabbis saying, yes, he was one of ours.